Okay, guys, 4 p.m. on our clock. This means that we are going to start the last presentation for today because we are nearing the end of the second day of S4 Summit 2023, the winter edition. And I am very happy that you guys are joining us. I can see first person joining us. Okay, a lot more right now. Let us know if you can see us and hear us and everything's okay. I guess we are now streaming on all of the platforms. Just give me 1 second so that I can make sure that we are everywhere, but it seems like everything's okay. Okay, I'm very happy that we have everything on point. And we also have our guest here with us. Paweł Kalinowski is joining us to present to you the topic that is Salesforce AI-powered development. If you are not familiar with our speaker, it will be after this presentation. He's a senior Salesforce developer and he works for Deloitte Digital. He's currently involved in financial services project for one of Deloitte's clients. We are very happy to have you with us, Paweł. Before I let you start your presentation, just let me say hello to our viewers and once again remind you guys that if you have any questions, if there is something that is really important for you or interesting to you, let us know in the comments. I will join Paweł in about 50 minutes to present your questions during this Q&A session that we are hosting after each presentation. So Paweł, once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll leave you with our viewers.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So this presentation will be about AI-powered development in Salesforce. I myself, I'm a full-stack developer, a little bit involved in also integrations, but with the current rise of AI, I've been delving into the topic of AI-powered development as it is quite a hot topic nowadays. And for this presentation and the agenda we have, well, first we need to define what actually means, what is AI-powered development. We'll go through a few reasons why you should use it, a few arguments as to why is it powerful for us. We'll then go through the setup process of GitHub Copilot, which is the AI tool we'll be focusing on particularly in this presentation. We'll go through the setup process in Visual Studio Code, and then we'll go through a small guide and different use cases on how it can be used and how it can be leveraged. We'll then conclude the presentation on how you should not use it, different concerns and limitations, and then we'll end things off with a little Q&A. So that's the plan for the presentation. Before I move in straight to the topic, I'd also like to point out that Salesforce does have a lot of announcements and it's planning to invest quite a lot into AI. So it's not something anyone is going to run away from. So there's tools like Einstein GPT. A great presentation by Wojciech was done on this yesterday. So I recommend anyone to also have a look after this presentation to look into that, but also a bunch of other tools like Salesforce Copilot, Copilot Studio, and a lot more. So we're going to be looking at some external tools and external AI that's not necessarily linked with Salesforce. However, Salesforce is also planning to invest and really go and explore these topics. So these are what Salesforce is planning. Now let's actually move on to what means AI-powered development. So right now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of AI tools out there at the moment. The most popular being tools like ChatGPT, which is probably one of the most powerful ones at the moment. However, there's also tools like GitHub Copilot. There's also tools like Cursor AI, which is like a cloud-based IDE which uses AI. So there's a bunch of tools out there, and probably today alone there's like 3 or 4 that came out that we haven't heard of yet. But the most battle tested are these tools that are ahead of us. And basically we leverage these tools and incorporate them into the software development process. That's the entire idea. So AI plays a role of like a co-developer, assisting you in every which way, and also enhancing your abilities as a human developer. You can think of it as a smart kitchen assistant. So let's say you're preparing a meal for dinner, then this smart assistant will tell you what recipes you can follow, what ingredients you have and what ingredients you can use, how to get from one step to another, perhaps help you summarize what you've done already and stuff like that. So you can kind of think of that in a way of an analogy for the development process. Here's a few reasons why you should use it. So these are some of the features that we'll be looking at today. So we have anticipatory coding. So this is where the AI tries to predict the developer's next coding step. So basically, this takes place in the form of little code suggestions, kind of trying to predict what you're trying to write next, right? So let's say we're in a class and we're writing a piece of code. AI will try to predict the next kind of thing you're trying to write based on what's already written. And a lot of the time, this comes very useful. A lot of the time, I'm kind of paused thinking what I can write next. And then I get a snippet, which happens to be exactly something that I want to write. It's not perfect, but it does save an odd few seconds here and there. And that time kind of adds up as you write code more and more. So this is a cool feature of AI. We also have pattern recognition. Now, this is one of my favorite features where AI kind of looks at the already existing code and it tailors its suggestions to your coding style. So it can be anything ranging from, I don't know, the way you structure your queries, or the way you your naming conventions in the code, or the way you write your variables. It will try to follow those patterns and mimic your coding style when it gives you suggestions. So upon accepting a coding snippet, you don't have to then change it around to suit your style. It's kind of already there in place, which is really cool. Extra efficiency is a very obvious one. Time is valuable for all of us, and AI can reduce that time you spend carrying out repetitive tasks. And this is where AI shines out the most, where you have to do boilerplate code or very repetitive pieces of code like unit tests, which kind of follow the same train of thought. Then AI is really good at doing that and saves a lot of time doing those things. Last but not least, we got multi-language support. So usually these AI tools are trained on billions of lines of code. So they happen to cater to the most popular languages out there, like C++ or Python or Java. So that was one of my main worries coming into using GitHub Copilot. I was thinking that perhaps Apex isn't that much out there compared to other languages, but to my surprise, it actually handles it pretty well. It's when it gives you suggestions, it's Apex specific syntax, so it's not even just Java syntax, which I was predicting that would happen, but it's actually really good at handling Apex code and it understands it. So this is another reason why it's worth taking a chance on this. Okay, so let's move on over to the tool that we'll be focusing on today, which is GitHub Copilot. So GitHub Copilot is a cloud-based AI which was developed by GitHub and OpenAI. It's trained on billions of lines of code, like I already mentioned. And unlike tools like ChatGPT, it's actually integrated directly into your IDE, which is probably one of the biggest advantages. So when you interact with this tool, it kind of is there with you at all times, and you can chat with it in your IDE. So you don't have to kind of tab out from your code and go to your browser or go to your app for ChatGPT and then paste bits and pieces of the code in ChatGPT. It kind of already understands the context you're in or the file you're editing, and it gives its suggestions based on that. So that's probably one of the biggest advantages. Excuse me. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the setup and demo process. So I'll quickly tab out and go to my Visual Studio Code. Now, GitHub Copilot supports other IDEs like JetBrains products like IntelliJ. I will be showing just Visual Studio Code perspective, but for the IntelliJ lovers, you don't have to worry. The setup process is slightly different in IntelliJ, but all of the things that we'll be following in this demo you can kind of apply it when you use GitHub Copilot. So in order to get started, we first have to navigate to the extensions. And here we have to search for GitHub Copilot. Once we search for that, we should get the first two extensions. So when I click on it, we have two extensions. One is the regular GitHub Copilot. The second one is the GitHub Copilot Chat. And once you install one of them, the second one should install by default. One is basically responsible for the code snippets that are suggested as you write code. And the second one is responsible for chatting directly with the Copilot. That's it for the Visual Studio setup. The rest of the setup is handled on your GitHub account. So as soon as you install these two extensions, you should have a little prompt at the bottom right asking you to sign into your GitHub account. And provided that you have a live subscription or you have a license for your organization, then as soon as you log in and authorize your GitHub account, you get a little robot icon at the bottom. Once you click that, you can see the status is ready. That means the GitHub Copilot is ready to use. Now, if there's like a small cross across this icon, that means there's something wrong. Maybe there's something not set up correctly or a license missing. So that's pretty much the setup process. It's very simple. In order for GitHub Copilot to start functioning and start working, we need to be inside of a file. So for the purpose of this demo, I'll be creating an Apex class. I'm going to create a selector for accounts. So quite a simple class. And as soon as we're in here, let me just quickly zoom in and let's delete this constructor. You can see that it already kind of gives us a suggestion. So Copilot works off of the file you're currently tabbed into, right? And there's not much context going on here. It's just the name of the class, but you can kind of see that it's trying, despite very little information, it's still trying to suggest us something. So based on the class name, select accounts, it's kind of trying to guess that, okay, we probably want to pull accounts from somewhere using a query. Now, this isn't necessarily something I want, but you can see how from very little information it's doing already this much. So you can expect that if there's a lot of code in a class, then it can do a good job of trying to figure out a little bit better of what you're trying to do. Now, if we want to accept this prompt, you can just press tab, and that way we accept the entire prompt. Let's say if we only wanted to partially accept this output, so let's say I only wanted the first part of this output and not the entire thing. You can see that you can accept the word by pressing Control and right arrow. So if I do that and hold right arrow key, I can accept like this part of the prompt. Let's say I'm only interested in this attribute. And to discard the rest, I would just press escape. And that way I discard the rest of the output and I can continue typing. If I wanted to re-invoke the suggestion from Copilot, so I wanted to explicitly want the Copilot to give me a suggestion, I can do Alt and \. You'll see that it starts working at the bottom right here. And you can see that it kind of gives me this output again. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to just remember all these keybinds. So if for your preference, if you want to set these keybinds to whatever your needs are, you can go to the command palette. You can type in shortcuts. And if we type in Copilot, you should be able to see all the commands related to GitHub Copilot and all the keybinds that you can set yourself. So this is my setup right now. Now let's go back into here. Let's re-invoke what GitHub Copilot was suggesting us. So let's see if it gives us this. Okay. Now another thing is that it will give you multiple suggestions. So this is just the first suggestion from the top. But if we actually hover over this, we see this is 1 out of 3. So if we click the arrow keys here, we can go through the different suggestions that it's giving. Currently, obviously, it's not varied because it's a very simple and low context situation. But I could also swift freeze options using the Alt and square brackets. So I could just see which is the most suitable for me. Now, that's just the basics of navigating GitHub Copilot. Let's start writing some code. So I'll delete this for now. And let me just write a basic method to get accounts. So I'll do that just by writing public. It's going to be a static method that returns a list of accounts. And I'm just going to call it get accounts by IDs. And then I'll pass in maybe a set of IDs. And I'll let it work for a second. So we passed in quite a bit of information here. So we said that we're returning type list of accounts. So we're returning a collection of these records of account. And we named it get accounts by IDs. So it's already kind of guessing that, okay, so this is going to be a set of IDs that we're passing. So we already gave a name to this set. And it has this inline query already here. So let me just accept this to see what, oops, let me just kind of go back. So let me accept this to see what it gave us. And it's quite a long query. But you can see that by the end of it, we're actually putting this parameter in the query, which is something that I wanted to do. But I don't necessarily want all these fields, so I'll delete all these. Right. Now, another thing is perhaps I don't like the way these queries are structured. So I don't want the whole query to be in a single line. So let's say I want to separate each clause to a separate line as an example, right? Now, if I go to another line to start writing another method, GitHub Copilot will pick up on this pattern and actually, based on that, give us another method that we may want to write, and it instantly follows this pattern of writing the queries where we separate each clause per line, which is the pattern recognition which I was talking about. Now, okay, let's say I'm interested only in the first part of this prompt, so I'll just select these because I want to return accounts. Now, I don't want accounts by type, but instead I want accounts with opportunities, for example, right? And let's see if it suggests us something. And you can see that it gives us a nested query for all the opportunities related to each account. Let me swift through the other options to see. I'm going to accept this one, right? I don't necessarily want this where clause, so I can delete that. But you can see that I'm already at a point where I'm happy with this. Now, it's not always going to be perfect when it gives you the output. Sometimes it's going to have bits and pieces which you don't really want, but that's what the tool should be used for. It should give you a starting point or a sort of a template which you can build upon, where you can change things around and tailor it to your own kind of requirement and your own demand. Another kind of, so you can see kind of followed also the pattern of separating each clause in each space. Another example of pattern recognition is, let's say we created a public attribute here. So I could say public list account months is equal new list of, maybe new string. It's a new list of strings. And I'm going to open this. And you can see that since this is a collection of strings called months, it kind of already guesses, okay, you want months in this collection, right? All the months of the year, right? So it's kind of useful that it kind of can guess as well based on the naming and the collections, right? Now, let's say I don't necessarily want the full names of each month. Let's say I wanted the first 3 letters and a dot. So let's do that. So I'll do Jan dot comma. And let's see, and you can see that it kind of picks up on this pattern and follows along where it says, okay, so I'll do first 3 letters in a dot, and that's going to be the entire array, right? So you can kind of see how this can become useful for all sorts of other scenarios, because this is quite simple, but it applies in every kind of dimension you can think of, this kind of pattern recognition feature. Let's remove this attribute for now. And so far, I've showed you an example of kind of writing out code as you go along. So as you write out the method names, including the types, it kind of picks up on that. But there's also another way of writing comments first and then invoking Copilot to give you the code based on your comment. I'm not a fan of this approach, but I see it quite a lot where people write comment, let's say, write method, or let's say method to get accounts by location using latitude and longitude in 10-mile radius. And let's see if it gives us something that we expect. Might not be perfect. Let's see if it gives us something that we want. So you can see that's working at the bottom right here. Yeah, so this is not like perfect. Like I wouldn't use this. Sometimes it does a good job if you can describe it well. But I'm honestly not a fan, so because it's just a little bit inconsistent. And this is also not the job of I think inline editing, because it's hard for the Copilot to really guess what you're trying to do. But you can see that some of the prompts, so if I go to the next suggestion, you can see that this is something more close to what I want, right? So we can see the distance method being used. So let's actually tab this. And you can see that it gives the 2 parameters in with the longitude and latitude. It puts the mile as the unit, and it measures it so it's less than 10 miles, right? So it's almost there. Maybe a few adjustments would need to be made for this to work. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for just using the Copilot tool. Now, let's say if we wanted to write unit tests, or let's say apply comments to all of these classes for all these methods, it's not really comfortable using just the Copilot inline editing, because you would have to kind of prompt it and give it a little bit of information before it starts working. And this is where the chat extension comes in. So on the left-hand side, if you don't see it, it might be in the additional views, and there is a chat that you can use. and you're now able to interact directly with GitHub Copilot. So I could tell it, and it's kind of aware of the context we're in now. So whatever whatever message you pass it along, it's going to look at the current file you have open or the name of the class that you kind of give to the chat, and it will try to find that reference in the file. So if we wanted to add comments to all of these, for example, I could say add JS doc style comments to the cell accounts class, for example. So you can see that it's using the reference of cell accounts, and it will go ahead and begin writing the comments for each of these methods. And it's a little bit slower right now, but when it finishes, we should be able to copy this code from this little panel that it has here. It's still working. So I actually wrote JS doc, I think. Yeah, so that's my bad. So it's written JavaScript type code. I actually wanted Java doc, but it's fine. Let's copy this. Let's see how it looks like. So you can see applied the comments to each method. And I just click copy here, or you can copy this code directly, but you can see that it gave the comments for each method. So doing this by hand might have taken longer than you just giving that information to Copilot to do it for you. Another good use case of chat is unit tests. So let's say I now wanted to create a unit test for each of these methods. So in order to start doing that, I would first have to create a new class. Let's call it cell accounts test, right? Now, the problem with using Copilot now, like the inline suggestions, is that it's not aware, it loses the context of the other file, right? So if we tab in, it's no longer aware of the file we've been on before. So it's going to have a hard time trying to predict what you're trying to write here. And this is, again, where the chat comes in. So you can think of like the Copilot and chat as bread and butter. They kind of work together in unison for you to be able to develop. So in here, I could go back to my cell accounts and then ask Copilot saying, write me Apex unit tests for the cell accounts class, right? And I'm trying to be very precise here, saying Apex unit tests cell accounts class. It's good to mention all these details because sometimes it might not be aware exactly the language or what exactly you want. So it's good to give it as much information every time. Don't just say, "Oh, write me unit tests," and that's it, because sometimes it will maybe give you unit tests for something different. Okay, so let's just copy this code. Let's see what it gave us, and let's close this window. So yeah, we can see it gave us 3 unit tests, 1 for each of the methods. It creates some test accounts, which is good, and it runs our methods, and then it has some assert equals. So this looks pretty legit. Now, obviously, it's not perfect, because let's, for example, like the assert equals are the old class methods. Perhaps we want to use the newer ones where we do assert dot r equal, right? That would be like the better way. We could add also the error messages as the third parameter to the r equal. Where the test executed, we might want the test.start start test and the test.stop test, right? So there's always going to be room for improvement, but I favor this as a good starting point where it already has all the references to my classes, the methods that I want to execute. It has did some basic data insertions. So this is, I guess, a good template to carry on and build on top of this, right? Okay, so that's another use case. One really cool use case that I actually used quite recently, and let me just go back to the presentation to fetch some of the demo info here. So I have a few fields from case that I want to use. So I'll just copy this. And let's think of like a very repetitive boilerplate code, which is what AI is really good at doing. Let's say we wanted to create a builder class for the case, right? So let me just clear all this. And let's say I wanted to, so I'm going to create a new class called case builder. And now I'm going to ask it, write me a case builder class in Apex using the following fields. And I will just copy and paste all the fields that I want. So it's going to use the case builder as reference, gives us some, I guess, preliminary information about how to go about it, but should give us Yeah, so there we go. It gives us this code snippet. Now this is not precisely something I want. So this other part is maybe something I want. So maybe we should give an example saying separate each method to set each field like this. Oops, I didn't copy that part. Okay, let's see if it does it. Yeah, so it didn't work the way I wanted to. Let's see. Okay, there it is. So that's exactly what I wanted. So you should give, like I kind of gave it very like basic information. So perhaps it didn't recognize exactly what I wanted, but I gave it a little bit more information that I want each method to set for each field. And now it's kind of doing the right thing, right? Where it kind of goes off and writes everything and it has the build method. And let's just wait for it to finish. And let me just copy all this at the top here. Okay. So I don't necessarily want that build method to do all of that. We instead would want something like a private case attribute at the top here, and then make this case to be added in each one. But you can see that I can just now replace each of these little lines of code to put this case object in, and we would be good to go. We wouldn't have to write each of these methods. We can also see that based on the field, it kind of gets the types right. So the account ID, it kind of guesses that this is a type ID. The close date, that's probably a date time, right? So it kind of gets the right direction a lot of the time. Let's scroll the way down. Let's see something else. So let's say this build method is also something that it's not really correct, but there's also a missing save method. So this is where another feature of Copilot comes in. So let's say I wanted to chat directly in the code editor. So I don't want to really tab out of the code and start writing and chatting with Copilot here. But what if I wanted to chat directly as I write code? And there's actually a new feature that allows us to do that. So if we type in Control I, we have a direct little dialogue that allows us to give it instructions as we write code. So we can ask it something like, write me a save method to insert case. And let's see if it understands that. Yeah, so this is exactly it, where it gives us the save method, and I can accept, I can discard, I can give it more information and re-roll. But yeah, it's for this example, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Let's just accept this. And yeah, almost got it right. But obviously there's some room for improvement to change this builder to be exactly what we want. But you can see the real power once you start using it, and there's more context to use. You have some services that you can paste some information in, use this service to create me this, and that way it's the most powerful once there's a lot of context that you can give it. But okay, that's pretty much it for the demo. So I'll quickly tab back into my presentation real quick. And let's go to the next slide. So here's a few, so this is all cool and all, very nice tool to use, but we shouldn't make the Copilot the pilot. We shouldn't delegate all of that responsibility of writing the code and just expect it to work and be perfect. We should be the main pilot, making all the decisions, and Copilot is just a supplement, right? It should be a helper tool, allowing us to just perform faster and be quicker, be more productive with our time. We shouldn't neglect potential code optimization and governor limit precautions. This is a really important point because Copilot doesn't have that awareness of the abstraction that's happening in Apex, because Apex is quite abstract. There is S objects, there is polymorphism, there is governor limits, there is a specific context of the transaction. So we might be in a before trigger, we might be in an after trigger, we might be inside an asynchronous operation. So Copilot is probably not going to have that context yet. I mean, it's evolving, it's going to get better over time, but right now where we stand, all of that information, it should be known by the developer, the main person that's coding. So that's going to be the limit of Copilot, is the failure to understand those abstractions. And that's where the developer should plug in his knowledge and use the Copilot just as a way to bolster their productivity. Don't lose the curiosity of learning more, enhancing your own programming skills. That's also an important point. a question I saw yesterday in the Wojciech's presentation was, oh, is AI going to replace us? And that's actually a common question. And at the end of the day, AI is trained on billions of lines of code, and those billions of lines of code contain bugs. So those bugs is what the AI is learning from as well. And who other to see those bugs than humans, right? So we should not stop to develop each other's capability. We should not stop to learn about scalability of code and implementing the most optimal enterprise applications. And we shouldn't just delegate all the responsibility to the AI, because that's just silly. With that being said, I would like to give my kind of last message to junior developers that are listening to this presentation. That's just my personal take, but I think that you should stay away from this tool for now, at least. Mainly because in my opinion, abilities of a developer should flourish organically. We should learn how to problem solve and learn the concepts of programming in a natural way. So if we are stuck on a problem, we should learn how to get to a solution ourselves, and maybe with the help of other developers. But we shouldn't have just like a button click which solves the problem for us. I don't think that's a healthy kind of way to enhance one's ability. ChatGPT, I think, is still okay, because at the end of the day, that's just like another Stack Overflow which everyone's using. So I think using the chat and maybe the Copilot chat and ChatGPT is still fine. But the inline code suggestions, I think, as a junior dev, maybe you should like limit the use of that. And maybe once you get to mid-level and higher, like senior level manager and so on, then at that point, I think you can really go ham and use these tools as much as you can. And that will be it for my presentation. So I would like to thank you all for attendance, and we'll go into the Q&A. So let's just wait for a little bit for the organizer to come back.
Okay, I'm back with you to let you know that we have some questions. We do, and we also have some time. So if you guys want to ask a question, be sure to leave it in the comments section. Okay, the first one is about money. Is GitHub Copilot free?
Unfortunately, no. It's a paid subscription. I believe it's for personal use. It's about $10 a month, so it's a pretty good price. You can also get ChatGPT, which is a little bit more expensive if you're going to get GPT-4. But yeah, it's a paid tool. It's a little bit more when it comes to enterprise, like business use licenses. So it's unfortunately not free.
Okay, another one. Have you ever heard any concerns from clients about using AI for development regarding its safety?
Yes. So this is a common problem. I actually encountered this on our like internal way of setting this up for GitHub Copilot. So like the inline suggestions, that's something that's kind of like safe. But when we get to the chat where people are pasting in code and code snippets to the chat extension, that's when you run into a little bit of a problem with security, and there might be some limitations. And it kind of goes back to one of my points where you should still evolve as a developer and enhance your own abilities and not rely on these AI tools, because there might be some projects which, one, can't afford these licenses, or two, let's say for security reasons are choosing not to use them, and that's where you're going to be left alone with your own skills, right? So that's how I'm going to answer your question.
A question that I would say is a recurring one during our summit. Do you think AI could replace developers?
Yeah, so I answered this at length towards the end of the presentation. I think no, because AI is trained on code that is made by humans, and that code contains bugs. So who else to fix those bugs than humans, right? So it's always good to be involved in increasing your ability as a developer and learning the programming concepts, because at the end of the day, I don't think any organization will choose AI generated code and just put it into production. There's always going to be that last barrier, a person checking over the code and doing code reviews to making sure it's good. And in order to do that, that person has to have some knowledge of the code and ability to really optimize it and make it better, right? So I don't think it's going to replace it. Wojciech put it nicely, where it's going to allow us to be better developers. If we use it well, it's going to enhance our ability to be developers.
Great. Let's see if we have anything on our YouTube page. Yeah, we do. Maya asks, Copilot GitHub is for GitHub account, but what about GitLab?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think GitLab. I haven't looked into that, to be honest. I'm 90% certain that this is only for GitHub, but this is worth researching if there is a way to connect the GitLab account as well. Although I'm not convinced, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Another question from Maya. Do you use Copilot in more complex code? Don't you think that there are situations that you spend more time to modify Copilot code than creating yourself?
Yeah, that's true. Regarding very complex code where there is lots of references to code that is not directly there in front of you, but using kind of other bits and pieces, at that point, Copilot, it might take you more time trying to put all the right prompts in and make it spit out code that you actually want. That's why the inline suggestions are something that is useful over time. As you write code, it gives you sometimes exactly what you need. The chat, I think, is best for use of like boilerplate code, where you have to kind of write out, like I showed the example of a builder, where you have a lot of fields that you want to create a builder from. So it's kind of a repeat process of writing all the methods. That's where like these AI tools really shine. Or when you have unit tests, right, where you're going step by step, writing and testing, let's say, each method, which kind of follows a similar train of thought, then AI will do a really good job of like doing this super quickly for you at once. So that's the simple case, simple scenarios which I would use personally. But for very complex, like I mentioned, maybe trigger context scenarios, or where there's lots of services and references at hand, then I think, yeah, it's better to rely on your own ability to do that.
Thank you. And another question from Alexander. How much of the client's code is shared with the Copilot?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. That would be a question to, I guess, look at the documentation in Copilot, and also a discussion like when the security team is trying to install this in an organization, then that would be a good discussion to, I guess, research and do some looking around there. From the top of my head, I'm not really sure about this question.
Yeah, and I think this was the last question, but there is this interesting opinion from another user regarding the possibility or lack thereof in the account of AI replacing developers. AI won't replace devs, but devs without AI will be replaced with ones that use it. Do you agree?
Yes, yep, absolutely agree. I don't think it's something we can avoid at this point. It's like a toothpaste bottle that has been opened and the toothpaste came out. We can't put it back in the bottle. So it's gonna be there always now, and to avoid it is being naive.
Yeah, what a great metaphor with the toothpaste. I've never heard it, so nice one to keep in mind. Thank you so much. I guess these are all the questions that we have right now in the Q&A session. So once again, Paweł, thank you so much for joining us during S4 Summit 2023. We hope you join us again during another summit. And we would also like to invite you guys to also visit Deloitte Digital during our virtual stands that we have, stage.s4summit.pl/Deloitte. There you can find our sponsor and meet the team. And also tomorrow you can join this stage and see some of the presenters from S4 Summit from Deloitte Digital. So once again, Paweł, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you for everyone for joining, and see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.